Imagine being told that the treatment keeping you alive might slowly take away the person you are. And then imagine being offered another option, a surgery that could save your life, but might erase the memories that make you you. For Oriah Pera, that isn't a nightmare, it's her reality. And just when she thinks she has accepted her fate, a summer in Mallorca introduces her to love, freedom, and a life she never thought she could have. But there is a secret she doesn't tell anyone, a secret that could turn her perfect summer into a fight for survival. This is The Last Sunrise, a 2026 romantic drama directed by Carlson Young and based on Anna Todd's novel. And today, we're breaking down the entire story, from Rye's terrifying diagnosis to the romance that changes her life, the family secret hidden beneath the island's luxury development, and the final sunrise that gives the movie its true meaning. So, let's get into it. The story begins with Oriah Pera, or simply Rye. She's young, she's a talented dancer, and when we first meet her, she's doing what she loves most, performing on stage. But suddenly, something goes terribly wrong. Rye collapses. Her body begins to shake. She's having a seizure. The performance comes to an abrupt stop, and her mother, Isolde, rushes to her side. Isolde is a successful businesswoman and a fiercely protective single mother, and after seeing her daughter suffer, she becomes even more determined to keep Rye safe. Doctors eventually explain what's happening. Rye has a serious medical condition connected to tuberous sclerosis, or TSC, which has caused tumors that are affecting her brain, and now she has a terrible choice. She can increase her medication, or she can undergo surgery, but neither option is safe. The medication can control her seizures, but it leaves Rye feeling numb and disconnected. The surgery could potentially help her condition, but there is a terrifying risk. She could lose her memories. For someone else, that might sound like a difficult medical decision. For Rye, it feels like choosing between two different versions of herself. So, she chooses the medication. She takes her pills several times a day. Her phone reminds her. Her mother reminds her. Everyone is watching. And Rye starts feeling like her illness isn't just part of her life, it's controlling her entire life. Then comes the opportunity for escape. Isolde needs to travel to Mallorca, Spain, for an important business project. She plans to spend 6 weeks on the island working on a luxury hotel development, and Rye goes with her. At first, Mallorca seems like the perfect place to forget everything. The beaches are beautiful, the water is crystal clear, the streets are full of life, the sun seems to shine forever. But Rye isn't there simply for a vacation. She's carrying something much heavier. She's carrying the fear that her entire future might already be decided. Then she meets Amara. Amara works at the hotel and quickly becomes one of Rye's first real friends on the island. For the first time in a long time, Rye starts behaving like a normal young woman, instead of someone constantly being monitored for her health. And then, she meets Julián Garcia. Julián is a local fisherman. He's confident, he's attractive, and he's not particularly impressed by Rye. Their first interaction isn't exactly romantic. There is teasing, there is attitude, there is tension. But beneath all that hostility, something is clearly happening. Rye is interested, Julián is interested, and before long the two begin spending more time together. Julián shows Rye the Mallorca tourists rarely see, the quiet beaches, the local community, the fishing culture, the places that mean something to the people who actually live there. And slowly, Rye begins falling for him. But there's something Julián doesn't know, something Rye has deliberately kept hidden. She has epilepsy, and there's something else she hasn't told him. Her mother is connected to a development project that could destroy Julián's family's way of life, because Isolde's company Redwin wants to build a luxury hotel, and the land they want belongs to Julián's father, Mateo. Suddenly, Rye's perfect summer has a problem. The woman she trusts most is working against the family of the man she's falling in love with, and Julián has no idea. But that's not Rye's biggest secret, because Rye is beginning to make another decision, a dangerous one. She starts thinking about what her medication is taking away from her. The pills control her seizures, but they also make her feel numb, and every moment with Julián makes her want to feel more. So Rye makes a choice. She stops taking the medication, and she doesn't tell her mother. At first, she feels incredible. She feels alive, she feels free, she feels like she finally owns her own body. But the audience knows something Rye doesn't want to admit. Her body is already warning her, and those warnings are about to become impossible to ignore. Because what happens next changes everything. Rye has stopped taking her medication, but instead of slowing down, she goes deeper into the summer, and Julián becomes the center of her new life. For Rye, he represents everything she has been missing: freedom, adventure, spontaneity, and most importantly, a future that doesn't revolve around hospitals and medication schedules. But Julián's life is far more complicated than Rye realizes. His family has lived and worked in Mallorca for generations. The Garcia family depends on the fishing docks. The docks aren't just property. They're their history, their livelihood, their connection to the island. And now Redwin wants them. Isolde's company Redwin sees the land as the perfect location for a luxury hotel. But to Julián, selling the docks would mean losing a piece of his family forever, and Rai is caught directly in the middle. She knows what her mother is planning, but she doesn't tell Julián. She keeps the secret because she's afraid of losing him, and that decision will eventually come back to haunt her. Meanwhile, Julián has problems of his own. His father's financial situation is getting worse, and a man named Carlos is putting pressure on Mateo to sell. Carlos isn't exactly the kind of person you want negotiating with your family. He becomes increasingly aggressive. Then things take a darker turn. Julián's father's boat is set on fire. The message is clear. Someone wants Mateo to give up. Julián is furious. He wants to protect his family's business, but Mateo eventually agrees to sell the land to Redwin, and when Julián learns what's happened, he's devastated. Then comes another bombshell. Rai finally tells Julián the truth. Her mother works for Redwin, the company threatening his family's future, the same company planning to buy the land. Julián feels betrayed. He realizes that Rai knew all along, and suddenly the romance that felt so perfect begins to fall apart. But while Julián is dealing with heartbreak, Rai's health is getting worse. She starts experiencing tremors. Small signs, warning signs, the kind she knows she shouldn't ignore. But Rai does exactly that. She tells herself she just needs to enjoy the summer, just a little longer. Because in her mind, going back to her old life means going back to feeling numb, and she isn't ready to give that up. Then comes the Redwin fundraiser. It's supposed to be a glamorous event, a night of wealthy guests, business deals, and celebration. But Rai doesn't want any part of it. Instead, she drinks champagne in the garden, and that's when Carlos finds her. He threatens her. Rai is suddenly alone with a dangerous man. But just when things seem to be getting worse, Julián appears. He saves her, and despite everything that has happened between them, the feelings haven't disappeared. The two reconnect. They kiss, and Rai takes Julián to the fundraiser. Now the world she has been keeping separate collide. She introduces Julián to her mother. Isolde immediately realizes how serious the relationship has become, but she has another concern. Does Julián know about Rai's illness? Because if he doesn't, then Rai is hiding an enormous part of herself from the person she supposedly loves. And before that question can be answered, Isolde sees someone across the room. Mateo, Julián's father. But Isolde doesn't react like a businesswoman seeing the owner of land she wants to buy. She reacts like someone seeing a ghost. Rai notices, and she wants answers. So she asks her mother, "Why do you know Mateo?" And that's when Isolde finally reveals the truth. Mateo wasn't just a businesswoman from her past. He was her first love. Decades ago, Isolde and Mateo were inseparable. They dreamed of a life together. But when Isolde's mother died, she couldn't bear to stay in Mallorca. She wanted to leave. She wanted Mateo to come with her to America. But Mateo refused. His family needed him. His home mattered to him. So Isolde left without him. But she didn't forget him. For years, she wrote him letters. Then one day, the letters stopped. Or at least that's what she believed. And now, decades later, Isolde is trying to buy Mateo's land. She tells Rai that she's actually trying to help him financially. But Rai isn't convinced. Because there are clearly secrets in this family that go far beyond a hotel project. And one question remains unanswered. What happened to all those letters?
After the fundraiser, Rai spends the night with Julián, and in the early morning, they experience one of the most important moments of the entire movie. They watch the sunrise from Julián's boat. For Rai, it's almost magical. She's finally living in the moment. No hospital, no alarms, no medication, no fear. Just the ocean, the sunrise, and the person she loves. But the happiness doesn't last. When Rai returns to the hotel, Isolde confronts her. She knows. She knows Rai has stopped taking her medication, and this time, there is no hiding. Isolde is furious, but underneath the anger is terror. She knows exactly what can happen if Rai continues without treatment. Rai argues back. She says the medication makes her feel like a different person. She says she doesn't want to spend her life feeling numb. And then she says something that cuts straight to the heart of their conflict. Mallorca has made her want to live again. To Rai, Isolde's attempt to take her home feels like another attempt to take away her freedom. To Isolde, Rai's decision feels like suicide. Neither woman understands the other. The argument escalates. Isolde insists they are going home. Rai refuses. She runs out. And then, her body gives out. Rai collapses. Again. Only this time, it's much more serious. She wakes up in the hospital. The doctors explain that her condition...
For a moment, nothing happens. Then she smiles. Something inside her recognizes him. Maybe the memory was never completely gone. Maybe love survived somewhere deeper than memory. And just like that, the two are reunited. But the ending means more than simply giving us a happy romantic conclusion. Because the last sunrise has been using the idea of a sunrise from the beginning. Rai spends the entire story terrified of endings. She's afraid of losing her memories, afraid of losing her health, afraid of losing Julián. afraid of leaving Mallorca, afraid that her future has already been decided. But the final sunrise tells us something different. An ending isn't always the end. Sometimes it's a beginning. Rai doesn't wake up with all the answers. Her illness hasn't magically disappeared. She still has to face her medical condition. She still has to deal with the consequences of stopping her medication. And her relationship with her mother has to change. But for the first time, Rai isn't simply trying to escape her future. She's willing to face it. And that is the real. Isolde finds her own form of happiness, and the Garcia family land is ultimately hefted. The movie doesn't spend as much time explaining all of this. Instead, it leaves us with a much simpler message. Rai doesn't get a perfect life. She doesn't get a life without fear. She doesn't get a guarantee that everything will be okay. She gets something much more valuable. A chance. A chance to live. A chance to love. A chance to make her own choices. And most importantly, a chance to see another sunrise. So, was The Last Sunrise really about a tragic romance? Not exactly. It was about a young woman who believed that her illness had already written the ending of her story. Mallorca gave her freedom. Julián gave her love. Her mother gave her protection. And her illness forced her to confront the one thing she couldn't run from, her own future. In the end, Rai learns that freedom doesn't mean pretending you're invincible. It means accepting the risks, facing reality, and still choosing to live. And perhaps that's why the final sunrise matters so much. Because sometimes the most important part of life isn't knowing what tomorrow will bring. It's simply being brave enough to wake up and see it. And that's where The Last Sunrise leaves us. Not with a goodbye, but with a beginning.